Big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today I have a global guest joining me right here. He's got quite a stellar reputation. He is the Chief Creative Officer of DDB Worldwide and making his debut visit to India. He's none other than Ari Weiss. Thank you so much, Ari. Truly a pleasure having you on Brand Equity.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so curious to know how your first experience has been in India, your first trip here ever. It can be quite overwhelming, in fact, quite a culture shocker as well.
Yeah, well, I'm about 22 hours in.
Wow.
18 we've spent in the hotel. So I'm sorry to say I don't have a tremendous experience yet. But even just the ride in from the airport, you see a different world. And when you're in this business, I think it's massively important, especially as you step into a global role.
Sure. And it's been about 5 months since you've taken on as the Chief Creative Officer of DDB Worldwide.
Yes.
Right. And you were CCO of North America for a few years. What has been the significant difference for you taking on, donning the global creative hat versus, let's say, the North America hat?
I think the biggest difference is, I spent my whole career in the United States. I jumped around from the different coasts and moved around a bit in the US. And you get a different perspective because different places in the US are quite different. But then when you take on a global role, it's a whole different perspective. And I think you go from being an expert at what you do to being really quite just open-minded and observant. And I think, it's part of the career that I always enjoy the most is the moment when you're really uncomfortable and you don't know everything, when you don't have any of your crutches or your shortcuts.
Right, but Ari, for you, I think, fortunate or unfortunately, this is a very, very difficult time to be a CCO, because things are changing so quickly.
Yeah.
Expectations from clients are, so varied and so confused, I would say, themselves. And the fact that, globally, we're also seeing some sort of a slowdown. We've been seeing it for a while, but, 2019, and as research and experts predict 2020 will be an even tougher year. And you've taken on the global role at such a time. What are your key learnings and findings as you've, met clients across, different geographies?
Yeah.
What's your view of and don't talk to me only about the few clients who've really got their A game on.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, the
general.
The broad mass of clients.
Yeah.
What is your sense after speaking with them? Are they clued in or just absolutely confused with where this world is heading?
I think the answer is yes. It's both.
It's both.
You get people who are incredibly clued in, and you get people who are, very scared or uncomfortable, in this moment. I think, when I first started, Keith Reinhardt, who's the chairman emeritus, he's one of the kind of founding spirits of DDB. We did an interview early on, and somebody had interviewed the two of us together and asked, what are the main differences? What are your approaches, the two of you, from when you were doing it, Keith, 40 years ago, to Ari when you're doing it now? And I think they expected us to have quite a different answer. But we actually said the exact same thing, which is ultimately creativity is meant to be the most powerful force in business. This is why companies come to us, because it allows them to compete with unfair advantage, right? How we do that today is a bit different than how we did that 40 years ago. But I think in a lot of ways, the simplicity of connecting these human truths, right? Finding like a simple human truth and telling that story in a compelling and fascinating way. Again, how we tell that used to be a product placement in a TV show, or it would be a print ad, or it'd be a radio commercial. That's all changed. Now we can do musicals or gene tests, or the Stay Free project for here in Mumbai.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I think the simplicity of it, the core of it hasn't changed, and I don't think it will continue to change. And I think the clients that key in on that are finding greater comfort because they're realizing the fundamentals of what they're doing hasn't changed. It's just the way we're telling the stories. And I think when you simplify it that way, it becomes a lot less overwhelming.
Yeah, but would you say that majority of clients, and not just DDBs, just clients broadly, have this mature understanding?
I think we've been seeing more and more of it. I think when this really started probably 10, 15 years ago, this change. I think, again, Keith kind of calls it the digital disruption, and I think,
But 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't so palpable.
No, but I think it was the beginning of fragmented media landscape, which is the ultimate cause of how do you target people. And I think the targeting, and we talk about data now, data is probably the hottest topic, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I think it's how do we target these people? How do we make sure we're getting the eyeballs? How are we making sure we're getting a good return on our investment?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of
the creativity out of people.
Well, actually, but I think a lot of the clients are seeing that they can't get the ROI by just doing the fragmented media buy, so they're forced into using creativity again. It's actually the only way to get that outsized reach.
But I mean, do you think it's just a time where creatives globally are frustrated because they have to now create with so many parameters and keep so many different aspects in mind, whether it be data that is fed or it be that there has to be an ROI, and there's so much pressure on it, as opposed to the slightly easier days of advertising?
I think it makes it harder.
Yeah,
I definitely think it makes it harder. But I think that when you find your solution nowadays, it's almost more obvious, the really good solutions, because they travel across all media. So when before you would do a campaign and you'd come up with a very interesting television idea, and then they'd go, okay, well, how would you do this in print or in radio or in this and that? You didn't necessarily know how to do that, and you didn't really need to. So campaigns were much more specific to media thoughts, I think, than brand thoughts sometimes in a lot of ways.
You feel that?
And I think now you have to really understand a brand's essence so that when it sits in any platform, whether it's doing hyper-targeted, programmatic, that's very blunt and just pure product offer and instrumentation, or the biggest brand efforts on something like, the Super Bowl, that you're understanding what the brand is and what it stands for.
Somehow, while we have so much more help in terms of data, in terms of, very, very focused platforms to reach, consumers, personalized message, personalized targeting, blah, 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 versus the tools that were not available, when all of this was not here. Wouldn't you say that general mind space that advertising was given by consumers, even let's say a decade ago compared to now, it was so much more then, and that's so ironic because technically all this data, all the surround help that we're seeming to get now should technically make all customers be a lot more tuned in to adverts and advertising per se, but data suggests just the opposite.
Yeah, I think with all the options you get much more noise, right? That's just standard. We were saying in the car ride over here, actually, the honking, that you hear in such a populated space like Mumbai. It can be deafening, and I think that's how the consumer feels now with messaging. So again, I kind of return to the clients that seem to be getting the best return on their investments are understanding that the creativity is helping them stand out in the noise, right? So again, I think the fragmentation, the challenges with the return on the investment, understanding how your brand sits in all these different fragmented media spaces, it's actually forcing a very, very simple creative idea so that the North Star becomes executable by not only our agency, but we work with tons of partner agencies. They have to execute on it. And this is a problem that every network's facing, not just DDB.
Also, the other thing, I'm glad you brought it up, this whole collaboration and the synchronized dance, right, that you as an agency is expected to do now, which was not there earlier. The complete ownership of the brand rests on your shoulders, as opposed to now where only one part, I don't know who holds ownership anymore actually, given there's so many in the mix. How is that impacting creativity at large? networks, not just DDB, but overall, as a creative person, I mean, if I ask you to don your creative hat for a moment and remove the DDB hat specifically, how is it impacting creatives at large? How is it impacting creation? And how is it impacting output, really? Because, it's difficult to synergize so much and get an output that is desirable to all, because the more number of cooks, the messier it gets.
I would say in the early days of the fragmentation, there was a lot of headbutting because everybody was an expert in what they were doing and nobody was listening to the other person. And this is always the case.
Of course.
We're actually here. The reason we're in India is we've brought all our top creative leaders from around the globe here to talk about creativity and the positioning of DDB and all this moving forward. The one thing we keep coming back to today was that to have the very simple kind of elevator pitch for what the creative idea is that you're presenting to, be it a client, be it a partner, be it a media partner, be it a PR agency, be it any of these hundreds of people that we collaborate with today, the simpler and more compelling that elevator pitch is, the simpler and better the campaign works across the whole platform. And I think clients are seeing the value in that as well, because they know that if they have a simple pitch, they can get all their partners on board. And I think, look, the real challenge for this new landscape is, you were joking or asking about who owns the relationship. It is the client now. And in a lot of ways, this puts a lot of pressure on them creatively, because how do you bring all these brands together to ensure a product that's cohesive?
Do you agree with that? Because I have a problem with that. If the client is the brand custodian and all the buck finally rests with them, and you're just a mere one of the many in the mix, and when I say you, I mean any network agency, then the problem is the whole positioning of a network is just minimized, because you just become a vendor amongst many, right? As opposed to, let's say earlier, a true creative partner and a real partner in crime. So that whole stature somewhat gets diminished. And if that is the case, then how does one really
what
move?
What are we doing? What value do we provide?
Exactly.
Well, I think there's a continuum. There's a continuum of where the brand is owned. Starting 100% with the client, and in some cases still, although rare, 100% with the agency. I think like everything, it comes down to the relationships and the dynamics. So when you have really, really good and equally talented partners sitting across the table from you, as you do on the same team as you can do amazing things together. And we see that quite a bit now. We have people on our client side that we would love to steal and have on our agency side, and vice versa. And sometimes we lose great people to our clients, and vice versa. I think we're living in a world, of collaboration right now. I mean, it is what it is. I have 2 young kids, and I always talk about, there's some statistic that I always read in when you talk about these kind of millennials and even younger generation, about 72% of the jobs that they'll take when they're in the workforce haven't even been invented yet. And when you're thinking about, when I'm thinking about my young kids and how they're entering into school now, and they're 6 years old and 4 years old, what skill set do they need to learn? When we were growing up, I think it was like, okay, doctor, lawyer, bank, you'll be fine. And I didn't end up that way.
I think there were simpler days.
But it's less so now. And I think now we're seeing that collaboration and humanity and being a good person and a good thinker and a good partner when you work almost has the greatest value. And I think we're seeing that across our clients, and internally as well.
The other thing I want to talk to you about is when you say that more and more clients, and this is true, most creative heads and CEOs you speak to say that, the ownership is now with the client. The clients themselves say that, no, we are our brand custodian, nobody else. Having said that, they're also moving a lot of the work in-house, and in-housing is becoming big. But on the other hand, they're also letting go of the whole marketing function. So there also lies a conundrum, right?
Yeah.
So you are in-housing quite a bit, but you suddenly feel the whole marketing function as being redundant. So hence we see more and more CMOs out of a job.
Yeah.
How are you seeing that?
Yeah, I think we see it kind of fluctuate back and forth. I can speak more specifically to it in the U.S. because
that's the market you're familiar with.
Still
Absolutely.
fresh to the global market.
Absolutely.
But we saw a lot of things taken in-house. We saw those fall apart and then get pitched back out to the big agencies.
Okay.
We see sometimes it go from big agency to small agency. There's kind of the cycles of, see what's working, see what's not working. When it's not working, blame whatever model it currently was, move to the next model, then blame that model, move to the next model, then blame that model. Or maybe something greater needs to be fixed. So I think, we're definitely seeing other agencies still today, other clients today bring stuff in-house. That's like, as of last week, we've seen some of that in the US. But I've also seen some of them fall apart and start to reach out back to the networks again. So it's, the challenge is the talent recruitment for the in-house agencies. And again, I'm speaking specifically to the US.
But those are where the world takes its cues from, so it's fine.
Yeah. I think, the only in-house agency that I think the creative community sits up and takes notice of really is Apple. And, they've built it really well. They brought in an incredible global CCO from within the industry.
Absolutely.
He's hired phenomenally. He continues to hire phenomenally, and they execute some very nice work out of it. But I think it's probably one of the only in-houses that shows up big on the international award circuit, shows up in big ways in culture, drives a real big brand and successfully. So I think until we see 2 or 3 more of those, I'm not as nervous. But will it happen at some point? Will people start to invest in it properly at some point? Probably.
How often in the last few years have you pitched against a consultancy?
I want to say once.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it because you're not pitching as much or they're not?
I don't think we're finding ourselves in too many of the same pitches. I do believe they're pitching.
Okay.
I think obviously the Accenture deal with Droga is fascinating.
Right.
It's 50% terrifying and 50% really, I think, confidence building, which is kind of at odds. But I think the confidence building side of it is if a brand like Accenture sees, the ginormous amount of value that they spent in that acquisition on a creative company, it means that what we do actually still has a lot of value. I mean, they can invest in many, many things, and that's what they chose to invest in. So, on that side of things, it's quite reassuring. Obviously, if this is how it continues to go, the marriage of data and creativity, if the cultures actually can truly live together,
can they?
We'll find out.
You must have the answer. Come on.
No,
you have the title of Chief Creative Officer. I'm sure you have a point of view.
I think they can. I 100% think they can.
Really?
I don't know if they can coming from 2 unique cultures. So what I mean by that is I think if we were to build Accenture and Droga 5 from scratch today,
okay.
And those 2 people were the founders and they were building their parallel disciplines with a single vision and from the get-go, I think that's probably the future. Can it happen in acquisition? I think that time will tell.
You mean you don't think so?
I think it's a lot harder to combine cultures. We haven't seen it work a ton, but we hadn't seen internal agencies work a ton until Apple. So, it's always a no until it's a yes. So
you're saying consultancies are not pitching, they are pitching, but they're not pitching as much, because I'm surprised that, you would only have, face them in one pitch.
So far I think this year that was the only, there's only one I can think of.
How are they doing in terms of, in pitches with clients? What would you say would be your core strength? And when I mean your core strength, I don't mean DDB, but
agencies.
Yes, agencies versus, let's say, and their core strength.
I think the consultancies are very good at doing brand audits and pointing out the weak spots. I think they have a harder time fixing the weak spots.
Okay.
I think they're really good at identifying it, and I think they're very good at selling it. And I think that the brands really, really listen to the consulting companies.
Yeah,
you know, they're better at it.
They seem to position themselves higher on the food chain, at least.
Yeah. Well, and in identifying the strengths and weaknesses of a business.
Sure.
You know, and that's what they're very, very good at.
Yeah.
What we're very, very good at is identifying the strengths of a business and how to make those strengths stronger.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think it's obviously through brand development. So we have very different skill sets. I do think they can be quite complementary. You know, so it's not the world of data does not scare me at all. I see it as another tool that actually can very easily enhance creativity. You know, we talk about this, like how we process data and how we use it strategically. And you know, 15 years ago, we would send cultural anthropologists out on a 6-month journey across the country to go study a specific cultural group, right?
Yeah.
And they'd come back and they would share their learnings, and you would get some incredible insights that you would then use in your campaigns.
Right. I want to ask you something which is, which happened a few months ago, and I really want to talk about. And this is really in keeping with the number of bespoke agencies that have been created, specifically to cater to large clients. And I want to talk about McDonald's and the fact that, after creating that bespoke model and catering to them, they chose, Widen. Can you take me through that whole exercise of what transpired, and how does it, when you go the whole hog for a client and then, it doesn't work out, what are the repercussions?
When I first came on, Unlimited was already underway, so I wasn't a part of the pitch. I think, like many things, as we talked about kind of the different structures and how they shift and how clients identify the strengths and weaknesses with each of the structures, I think the bespoke structure it's a challenging structure.
Yeah.
So when I came in, it was how do we gear up to 200 plus people in 6 months?
Sure.
That's a challenge for any agency. It doesn't matter what size the network.
Absolutely.
We went about doing, a breakthrough piece of work very quickly, so that we could have kind of proof of concept that this was going to be a great creative and business collaboration. We then were able to hire, great talent behind that, and start to grow the agency as quickly as humanly possible. I think what Unlimited did phenomenally was get up to speed and deliver the 15,000 plus assets that can be delivered a year for a brand like McDonald's. So the infrastructure to get that up and running properly in under a year is nothing short of a miracle. I think, of course, coming off of that pitch, Deborah had left and she's now with a big car company, and a new leadership team came in. And they were asking, why a bespoke agency? And we proved to them, look, it has a lot of great values. And I think they really appreciated that for a while. As time goes on, there were some cracks or some things that they were wishing, had been different. And I think because they didn't create the bespoke agency, it became a question of, is this the right model, forward? And look, to have done this for as many years as it was, and to have done it as successfully with campaigns like the Mindy Kaling campaign, the McDonald's Flip, I mean, they won 10 Lions in 2 years from a 0 to a 200-person agency. I think it's a remarkable accomplishment. I think, it's unfortunate that it's not forever, but these things are oftentimes not forever. So it's a disappointment, of course. But I think what was accomplished in that time frame was nothing short of miraculous.
And last question before I let you go, 2 things that you expect to see in the new decade in terms of a complete change and something that it would be different and a surprise to most people.
I think the targeting is going to become a real thing. I mean, it's already how hyper-targeted we can get segments is already becoming something. But I think how we create our content and how we build narratives around hyper-focus groups is going to be a very interesting development.
And number two?
Number two, I think where the big networks end up, I think will be very interesting.
Yeah,
I think
good point. What's your bet?
Well, I think we're seeing a real bet on kind of humanity and creativity with IPG and Omnicom. And I think we're seeing a big bet on kind of efficiencies in digital with the Publicis and WPPs of the world and Dentsus.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ari.
Yeah,
This has
thank
really
you for
been
the time.
insightful. Thank you so much, and
Yeah.
all the very best for your innings as CCO.
Thank you.
And have a great India trip.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.